Well, thanks everyone for coming. I'm glad that we have a couple minutes today to talk through something that I think is actually probably one of the more fundamental parts of running not only an online business, but a membership business. And if you just think about the typical approach that most people are going through as they're building their website, as they're trying to sell their product or their service, and they're trying to get more paying members, the sales page approach is something that folks think that they're doing in a good way, but turns out that they're actually setting themselves up into what we're going to look at. I call it the homepage trap of your website. So I'm excited about what we're going to talk about, and I think my goal here is that you walk away from this presentation with a new perspective that's likely different than what you have now regarding your website, your web pages, and how you're using or not using landing pages. So with that being said, just a little bit about me, like Lauren mentioned, I have ran a membership business for 5 years now. I have been a Memberful customer for 5 years. I use Memberful to run my business. And, prior to arriving here at Memberful and becoming part of the customer success team, I went through a lot of this process of trying and failing and trying this and getting this result, but not being exactly where I wanted to be. And through years one, years two, and years three pass, and you end up in a space where, it becomes tempting to just kind of like hit the brakes and just say, okay, I'm just not going to get this. And the goal here is that when we're done talking through all of the moving parts around sales pages and landing pages today, that new perspective that I hope you walk away with takes you to a place where you can know that what we're about to tell you has been like proven time and time again, not only with Memberful customers, but for customers that run businesses outside of membership. But keep in mind that everything you're going to see here today is basically massaged into a format and is going to apply directly to membership. So other than that, let's dive in because we've got a lot to cover. And the first place I want to start with is just to highlight what we're going to talk about. So, like I mentioned a few moments ago, there's this thing that I refer to as the homepage trap. And what I mean by that is that typically we all have an idea in our minds about what a website should or shouldn't be. And when it comes to optimizing for conversions and increasing your sales in a way that, is measurable, in a way that keeps your business sustained, what we're going to find is that most of the conventional website advice and tips and tools that you come across could not be further from putting you in a spot that's going to prime you for success. So that's going to be where we spend a lot of our time today. But other than that, we're going to get into basically a proven process where you take the leads that you capture on their own journey toward making that conversion on your site. One of the things that we often see is that a lot of customers, they put a lot of time and effort into the website. They walk away with a website that looks perfect, but there's no customer journey. There's no customer experience that happens before they land on that website to make them ready to purchase. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at some of the common conversion killers. And what I mean by this, or what are the barriers that are probably present on your site today that prevent someone from signing up efficiently or distract that user from doing the thing that you want them to do, which is obviously sign up for your membership. So we're going to look at all of the things that may be in the way that you may not realize are in the way, and how to remove those and optimize that process to where you have a page that's solely focused on converting those leads into paying customers. And other than that, we've got core components of our highest converting landing pages that we're going to talk through. And I think you're going to be surprised at the idea about landing pages versus your website and how each of those serve a specific purpose in your larger strategy. And we're going to work in some of these, I call them secrets and tips and other strategies that you can implement on your landing page, on your sales page, that will just do nothing more than amplify the results that you're going to see. So to start with, let's talk about the homepage trap. The homepage trap is if you're a typical customer or you're someone who is pursuing their idea online or you're someone who's pursuing a membership business, you probably have already learned that you need a great looking website. And not only does the website need to look great, but there are some core features that that website needs to have in order to be optimized for an event. And obviously, the event that's most important to all of us is having someone make a purchase on that site. But the question that I want you to ask yourself is, can you sufficiently say one particular purpose that your website serves today? So, for example, what do I mean by that? Is your website the place where you conduct your sales? Is your website also the place where you start conversations with leads? Is your website also a space where someone is just receiving an impression of your business? Without us realizing it, our core website is doing lots of different things. But what we're going to see is that the one thing that our website probably does the worst is convert leads into sales. And that is the precise thing that we're going to talk through how to overcome today. And here's the problem with what we typically see with our customers and then similar customers throughout the industry of membership. If you look at what your homepage should do, there's about 5 core things that we believe and we have proven that if you take this approach, you're going to set yourself up in the best possible position for success with your membership. So number 1, drive awareness of your brand. The website needs to look like you. So you have a vision in your mind of who you want your brand to look like. You have colors, you have font types. Everything that your brand embodies is how you want the world to perceive your business. And the website needs to drive awareness of that brand. The website needs to define the problem that you're committing to solving for your customers. You want to make an impression. And when I say impression, imagine if you're in a bookstore and, you're scanning each aisle and you see a book that catches your eye. Maybe it's a particular color. Maybe there's something, elegant about the design of that book, but there's something about it that's memorable. So when I say make an impression, what makes your website memorable? And then maybe it's your color palette. Maybe it's the type of font you use. Maybe it's the copy that you use on your website. So impressions are very key here. And the element of curiosity that's sparked when someone comes to your site for the first time, if you think about 99% of your traffic on your website, most folks may not know that there's a problem they need to have solved for them when it comes to your specific product. So if the website that's public facing, and in this case, when I'm talking about your website, I do want to reiterate here that this is your website that if someone types your brand into Google search engine, the first result they see, they click, that is your website. And the mental model here for websites versus landing pages versus sales pages is key. So we're talking about your public facing website right now. So the last part of that website, though, needs to showcase the features of whatever it is you're doing. So those are like the 5 things that your public facing website needs to do. And the problem with what happens in the process of creating a site, setting up a business, running ads and sending traffic to your site is most folks do these things really well. But the problem is they also try to include a 6 point under here that says make sales. The problem with that approach is you cannot successfully optimize your core website for all of the different types of traffic you may get to that site. And what I mean by that is that sometimes when it comes to generic traffic, targeted traffic, referral traffic, a website, there can only be one version of your website. And where we see the gap existing is where folks come into this experience and try to do all of these things on their website. So how do we bridge the gap between having all of these points here on the screen being accomplished, and how do we make sure we have a focused strategy that also leads folks down the path to conversion? And there's a few other rules that I'm going to run through here really quickly before we dive into that about the things that your homepage on your website should not do. So you do not want your homepage to contain your sales pitch. This is a major factor in the mix when it comes to customers who are selling a service or a product, a membership. This would apply across the board. But if you look at membership specifically, you do not want that homepage to have your sales pitch. You do not want that homepage to be the default destination where you send targeted traffic, for example. You also don't want that homepage to be part of your sales funnel. And these 3 points right here are precisely the most common mistakes we see being made when it comes to a sales strategy. And folks ask the question of, I get 1,000 visits to my site a day and I get no conversions. And if you take a step back and you zoom out a little bit, you'll quickly start to see why that is. And at the core of that matter is this notion that your homepage on your website simply can't do all these things. And how do we address that? So if you look at a homepage that attempts to sell someone on the spot, you'll end up in a cycle where you have traffic and visitors landing on your site. They browse without an intent. They become distracted because most websites contain a significant amount of distractors on every page. And ultimately, they exit without taking action. And the most important action that you likely want them to take is making a purchase or signing up for your membership. So when we look at that particular cycle, we ask, how do we avoid that? And what needs to happen to change that? And we land in a spot that tells us we need a landing page. Keep this in mind. Landing pages are entirely separate from the homepage on your website. So if your website is what the public sees and the website is your medium for educating and highlighting your services that you offer to the world, think of your landing page as being the necessary first stepping stone in that journey that you need to send a qualified lead to before you even think about trying to convert that person into a paying member. So we want to speak specifically to audiences that we know something about. So for example, let's say you have an Instagram account and you have a Facebook account all tied to your membership. And, let's say that you want to send targeted traffic to your site from Instagram and from Facebook. And what you'll find is that folks who land on your website from different sources have significantly different characteristics that change what that audience needs from you in order to make a purchase, in order to establish trust, in order to strike a common line of communication between you and that customer. Something different has to happen for every space that we send folks to the website from. So landing pages solve that problem. Landing pages let you speak to these different audiences in specific ways, and they also let you do it in a space that contains no distraction. And what I mean about distraction is if you look at the common website today, you land on a homepage, there's probably, 7, 8 core sections on that homepage that educates you on the value of whatever product or service is being offered. There's a menu at the top of that website. There is a footer at the foot of that website. There are social links on that website. There are all these moving parts and all of these paths to take someone off of your website. And if you think about it, it makes good sense to have, a strategy that lets folks see, your social proof and your social profiles and how many, what's the content you're putting out, how many followers are engaging with that content. But when it comes to sales specifically, we need to get folks onto the site, and we don't need to have any path that leads someone away from that site. And when we have a landing page, that's exactly what we're able to do. We're able to create a space to have a conversation with that audience. We can be personal, we can be to the point and relevant, and we can do it all without distraction. And this is precisely when you think about a landing page versus your website. You can't do all these things on your website. It's just impossible, but you can do this on a landing page. And we're going to look at a few examples here in just a few minutes about what this looks like in the real world. But again, the mental model here is you have your public facing website, you have your menu links on that website. It's the traditional site, but we need a landing page that's separate from that. And what we're going to see in a few minutes is where that fits into the grand scheme of collecting a lead, nurturing that lead, and ultimately converting that lead to and optimizing for the event you want that person to take. So the problem with homepages, if you just look in the membership industry, The average bounce rate is about 82%. And what that means is that 82% of folks who land on that homepage of your website exit within just a few seconds. The average conversion rate across the membership industry for home pages on your website is 0.19%. The average time spent on the homepage is 22 seconds, and the average number of pages viewed is 1.6. So if we just take a step back and think about that for a second, no online business could survive with those stats. It's literally impossible to have a sustainable business with an 82% bounce rate, with a 0.19% conversion rate, and a 22-second time spent on page. It's just not feasible. So the question is, what do we do about it? And we create landing pages, and landing pages are going to come in and directly solve this problem in a way that you may not have thought about yet. But once you see this in action, it's going to flip your perspective on, the scenario where you're trying all of these different things on your site itself, and you're going to start to optimize separate landing pages for different events. That's going to put you in a position to convert more and more paid members over time. So that's the goal. That's the goal we're going towards, is like site visitors, converting as many of those visitors as we can into your membership. And there are a few ways that we can look at this, but if you think about at a high level what it takes for someone to have a touch point with your brand, have a conversation with that person, have them learn about the service, and then ultimately hope that they make a purchase, that is a very difficult process if you have no sales funnel defined. A lot of people get nervous when you start talking about sales funnels, and they think that it has to be this complex thing that happens that they don't necessarily have the means to create. And what does it even mean to have a sales funnel? But what I'm going to show you here is it's basically a 3-step approach to how this looks when you apply it to whatever it is you're doing now. You can apply what I'm about to tell you to whether you're a newsletter business, whether you are a podcaster. It doesn't matter what industry you play in. This will directly apply, and you can be readily applied. You can plug this into whatever you're doing at whatever moment. So we're going to look at creating a journey for customers that basically will take those customers, capture leads, and we're going to generate more sales from those leads. We have to have a funnel to generate leads and turn those leads into paying customers. And this is what this looks like when you apply it in the real world. So if we look at the potential market that exists for any service, any product, we're gonna imagine, let's say you're a paid newsletter company, and you know that there's 15 million people that may be interested in your product. What can happen when you have here's your homepage on your website over on the left. This is the part of your website that we talk about that's always public facing. This is where you want to spark curiosity. This is kind of like your billboard on the highway of the internet. This is going to drive consideration among the folks who land on that page. But what happens is 99% of the time, once folks exit the homepage, they don't return. And they don't return because of a few reasons. Either we haven't collected information from them, or maybe they have no intent when they're on your website to make a purchase. So how do we change that? So we need to get into the space where we have general traffic and get into a space where we're working with targeted traffic. And there's a lot of ways you can generate targeted traffic. And this looks significantly different depending on which industry you operate in. But if we look at the most common ways that customers send targeted traffic to their website or to a landing page, that could be a paid ad on Facebook. That could be a paid ad on Instagram, Google. It could be a sponsored blog post. It could be through a partnership with a company that you've partnered with to promote your product. And there are lots of ways to target traffic, but what I want to focus on is, what do you do with that target traffic? And the most detrimental thing that you can do with targeted traffic is send it to your homepage on your website, for a lot of the reasons that I've just talked about. And if we think about what has to take place for someone to have a touch point with the brand? What has to happen between the initial touch point and the point at which they ultimately decide to purchase from you? There's three core things we're going to look at. So landing pages, again, the core components of a landing page, not public facing. So if I were to type in my business in Google, I would not want to see a search result returned that includes a landing page for a specific type of traffic that I'm sending to that page. So landing pages are typically not public facing. They are used to capture leads. They offer some form of instant value. So whether that's a lead magnet, whether that's a personal coaching call, whether it can be anything. But if you think about the lead magnet itself, it has to offer instant value. The landing page usually has brief, effective copy, and it requires no scrolling on the screen. So what I mean by that is someone sees your ad on Facebook, they click the ad, they load the page. They need to be able to take action on that page without having to scroll. That would apply on a desktop or a mobile device. But considering that the bulk of traffic to the websites these days is mobile, you're not only does that page need to be mobile friendly, but you need to ensure that the action that you want that person to take is above the fold, meaning that you do not have to scroll that screen one time in order for that action to occur. And lastly, but most importantly, is that from the user who lands on that landing page, there needs to be zero risk involved to that individual. What I mean by that, if you load an ad that you're on Facebook, you see an ad for a product, you click that link. Maybe that link takes you to a landing page that tries to sell you on the spot. If I'm a first time customer, or I'm a lead that's seeing your brand for the first time, that purchase represents a substantial amount of risk for me. I don't know much about you. I think I know what your product does, but I'm not necessarily sure. I may need to learn more before I take action. So it's a risky transaction to try to sell someone on the spot on a page. So when we think about what has to happen, we've got the first step that involves sending that traffic to a landing page. And that landing page needs to basically do one thing, and it needs to capture their email. And once someone gives you that email, they need to expect to be delivered that piece of value that I talked about earlier. So your lead magnet, that can be lots of different things, but it needs to align to what you know your audience is interested in. So a lead magnet is by far the best way for you to capture leads on a landing page. And I'm going to show you a quick example of what this looks like in the real world. So you can imagine if you're a business operator or you're a membership operator, let's say we've got a fictitious brand here we've created called Membership Lab. Membership Lab knows something about you, and we have told our ad spend that we want to target business owners, or we want to target membership operators. So let's say I'm scrolling Facebook, or I'm scrolling Instagram, or I'm on Google, and I see an ad that seems like it could solve a problem that I may or may not know I have at the moment. So as business operators, one thing that's of primary interest to any of us would be more revenue. How do we increase revenue? So if Membership Lab, the brand that we're working with here, wants to capture more paying customers, it needs to do one thing. It needs more leads. And how do we get those leads in an effective and low cost manner? So here are the few things that I talked about a while ago. If you look at this page, the brand is prominent. So we know immediately what the name of this brand is, Membership Lab. And we ask the person who lands on this page a question. And this is very key here. If you think about landing pages and website copy in general, when you ask a question to your audience versus making a statement, you're going to see 30% more actions taken because you asked a question versus making a statement. And that is a key point that I really want you to make a note of, because when you ask a question to a prospect, that prospect immediately becomes more curious, more in tune with, and more interested in your brand, because a question naturally sparks curiosity. So if I'm a business operator and I see this landing page and I'm asked the question if I'm ready to double my membership revenue, suddenly I'm interested. And that was a very easy way to get my attention. Second, the lead magnet here is that I get a free step-by-step guide on turning my business dream into my reality. So this could be interpreted a few different ways. But what we know about this audience is that this audience is made up of individuals who run businesses. We know our audience is made up of individuals who want more revenue. And because of that, we need to provide something of value that those folks could use immediately to see some sort of result. And in this case, it would be getting a free step-by-step guide. So this landing page, again, everything's above the fold. I do not have to scroll. I do not have to take any other action than to say, I'll click the get the guide button here, and I will instantly be taken to a spot where I enter my email and I am expected to get that guide in my email. And immediately there's been a huge delivery of value without asking me for anything other than my email address. So again, zero risk to me as the potential customer. And as the person who set this landing page up, what I've done is I've tapped into a piece of this audience where I know what's valuable to them. And I'm going to send them a piece of content that they can readily use to see a result. And because of that, they are going to be more likely to listen to me. They're going to be more likely to trust me, and they're going to be more likely to buy something from me, which is what we want to happen. But this is the first step in that process is having an effective landing page. Remember, landing page equals lead capture. Landing page is simply for capturing that lead. We'll see what happens on the sales page downstream, but this is particularly the process for capturing that lead. So those are the components that I really wanted you to make note of on the landing page itself, was that it's simple, it's brief, it asks a question, and there is no friction and there is zero risk. Very important points there when we think about what a landing page is supposed to do. So, okay, I've collected the lead at this point, and I know something about this audience. And I know that this audience needs information that's going to help their situation. This particular audience's situation is that they need higher sales. Now, if I look at what happens after the landing page is visited and my lead magnet is delivered, there's some nurturing that has to happen here. This space and the nurture in the nurture blob on the screen, there are a lot of different things that can happen here. The most common thing is that we typically see and that we encourage folks to do is the simple case where you have an email address and you start a conversation with that potential customer about the problem that you know they're having. What that could look a lot of different ways. So maybe it's more sales are needed. Maybe they need just better business direction in general. Maybe they have a great product, but they don't necessarily know how to take that product and massage it into a format that's scalable and able to be delivered to folks at scale. So there's a lot of ways you can nurture an audience, but when it comes to this nurturing step here, there are a few key points that I want you to make a note of. So we're gonna jump around a little bit, but when we think about nurturing, I'm going to briefly touch on some of the most effective ways that you can do this, because what's going to happen is the more time you spend and the more effort you put into this part of your process, the easier it's going to be to convert that traffic into paying members. So personal and conversational tone. People like to read emails as if they were speaking directly to someone. Folks like to consume content that's written with a flavor of being super personal and not too proper. It exudes a feeling of trust. It exudes a feeling of, of being casual. And it's almost like you're just striking up a conversation with someone that you've just met. That is a highly effective way to keep people very engaged with whatever emails you're sending to them, whatever content you're dripping to them throughout the process. But most importantly, we want to qualify and build upon the problem that we know we need to solve for this audience. So how do you do that? Well, we likely know at this point what the problem is they're having, but we have to explain the gravity of that problem and what happens if this person was to come out of a scenario where they don't take the action you want them to take. What is the consequence of inaction? For example, if you decide to disengage and not read the emails being sent, you're going to miss out on something that's proven to have generated results for hundreds of other operators just like you. Highlighting what the consequence of inaction is on the prospective customer's part is really going to grab their attention and drive even more consideration. Second or third, I, I would highly recommend you find a way to offer up an emotional view to sympathizing with whatever that person's problem happens to be, and lead with a story. Folks relate to stories better than any other format out there. If you have a story to tell around your product, and you have a way to plug your product into that story and readily show how your product improves someone's situation, you're going to have a lot easier time selling and converting these people in the third step that we're going to talk about in just a second. And frequently, but not too frequently, I think it's important to highlight what's already happening inside the membership or inside the service that you're wanting this person to participate in. So let's say that you send out one email a week. Maybe every other week, you can have a section in that email that highlights some of the successes that other folks just like you are seeing inside that membership or inside that service. The more stories and the more direct conversations you can start around how this product or how this service improves someone's situation, the better spot you're going to be in when it comes to converting that person into a paying member. And then the last but most important piece to this is that when we're nurturing, at some point, we're going to want to deliver an offer that feels exclusive. If someone took the time to subscribe to your email list, that person needs to feel as if they have some sort of inside track or inside line of sight into whatever it is you offer. So a lot of ways, several customers will come to us and ask the question that says, okay, I have 4,000 people on my email list. What do I do with those people? And the first question that I always ask is that, what is the conversation you're having with these folks? And the second thing I ask is, how are you making this whole experience feel super exclusive for them? And if you can do those two things well, you're going to prime that lead to being so close to the point of conversion that the action that you're going to ask them to take on your sales page in just a moment is going to be a very easy process for you. But when it comes to nurturing, the takeaway here is that there's infinite ways to do it, but you need to make sure that the conversation you're having with that user is aligned with the action that you want them to take on our sales page. And I'm going to back up here so we can take a quick look at the sales page section, because this is where everything we want to capture happens. Everything in this green space here is what I call revenue generating activities. So by default, if you have a way to target your traffic, get that traffic onto a landing page, and you have a process in place to nurture that traffic, all of those activities are going to generate a return for you. The problem is that about 90% of customers, 90% of membership operators, first-time membership operators, spend all of their time in this section over here, where they're sending general or not heavily targeted traffic to their website, their public-facing website, and they're trying to convert folks in that space, when in fact all of the conversion and all of the revenue that's built on this membership business happens here. So we want to spend as much time in this area as possible. I always tell folks to think of their homepage on their website as kind of like a brochure or kind of like a billboard. It needs to be there for that purpose, and it needs to be there to drive awareness, but it does not necessarily need to be the tool you're using to drive the meaningful conversions for your business. On the sales page, so step 3 here. So we had the landing page, step 1. We've nurtured in step 2, and then we're now on the sales page. The sales page is simply just another form of a landing page, but this is where you're going to actually make the sale. And believe it or not, the most frequent mistake that I see made by customers at Memberful and other folks that I talk to when it comes to running an online business is that they have a sales page or what they think is their sales page, and the sales page never asks for the sale. And what I mean by that is that imagine you're on a website and you learn about a product or service, and whoever operates that website has made sure that it looks perfect, the copy is great, and that there is a button on the bottom of the page that says purchase now. That's not asking for the sale. In fact, that's probably like the most guaranteed way to make sure someone doesn't purchase from you. And what I mean by that is that when you ask for the sale, you need to be bold, you need to be confident, and you need to actually ask the person who you're talking to purchase at this moment in time, create urgency around this product. And if you can find a way to tie urgency with the identified need of that audience, because you've already nurtured them and spoken to them in a very targeted way, this is going to become the easiest part of your whole process. And and interestingly enough, it's the part of the process that most people think is the hardest. So I would say 80 to 90% of the effort happens in steps 1 and 2, and the last 10% happens in step 3. So that's kind of the magic of the landing page to the sales page journey that folks who implement that they see. There's an infinite number of ways that you could go about converting traffic, but what we frequently see as being the most efficient path to conversion is this 3-step process. And one of the things I'm going to show you now is that the sales page. So we're here. If you'll remember a while ago, this is our lead capture page that we went through. We've nurtured this audience, and now we're ready to let's say it's a week later. Let's say it's 2 days later. You have to get to the point where you have to ask this group of people to purchase from you. You have to offer an incentive for these people to purchase from you. And how do you do that? Well, you've been working really hard by sending emails and creating conversations and explaining how your product fits into their situation. So at this point, that relatively warm traffic that you captured your leads from is now a really hot traffic. They are the closest to conversion as they're going to be, because they've heard from you, they trust you, they recognize you. Now that we've got the last 10% of the equation left, and now all of this happens on the sales page. So let's say that I send an email campaign and it is now time to ask for the sale. So let's say that this is the sales page that someone is going to see after clicking a link in my email. Headlines. So when you think about a sales page, the act of pushing someone toward the point of conversion becomes less aggressive. But what you have to make sure of is that your headline and the first few lines of text that your leads are seeing on this sales page is not only relevant, but super impactful. So if I'm a business operator and I've clicked a link in this email to join Membership Lab, I see immediately that 85% of memberships fail. If I'm someone who has an aspiration to operate a long-term membership business, that grabs my attention and it makes me want to listen, because not only do I want to know why 85% of memberships fail, I don't want to be part of the 85%. So this is the information that I know about this audience. I know what they're interested in. I know the value proposition that needs to be painted so that they take action. So if we look at the sales page, something key here, every sales page and the most successful sales pages that we see, there's 2 things that happen on the first above the fold section. It's that headline, and it's an element of scarcity and urgency that's offered because someone is on your list. This isn't something that's public facing. This isn't what someone who lands on your general homepage on your public facing website is going to see. This is the message that someone that you have been having conversations with, who you've been educating your product. When there are so many things now that these folks know about you, they don't need all of the other information that's probably on your homepage in front of them. But what they need in front of them now is just what's necessary. And what's necessary is that you need to have a path that requires, if someone's ready to sign up now, they need to be able to click that button above the fold. That's this button here, this first button you see, without having to scroll. They may not be interested in at this point anything else you want to say. So I see a lot of customers who send out an offer to a very targeted email list, and analytics show that that person doesn't really need to be sold any further by the time that they're on the sales page. They are ready to purchase. So offer an instant path to sign up by keeping a button above the fold. So for everyone else who's not ready to purchase at this moment, but needs to read a little bit more about what you have to say, they can scroll down. So one of the core components here, I would suggest you find 3 very tangible benefits that you can list out to make sure that this lead knows exactly what they're going to get at the moment they sign up. So in this case, I'm marketing toward a business owner. I'm going to offer one-to-one coaching. I'm going to offer a tailored strategy, and I'm going to offer industry deep dives to help this potential customer of mine find out what are the biggest market opportunities that are in front of them so they can increase their revenue over time. Past that, testimonials. Testimonials are going to amplify and be a multiplier for any result that you have on your landing page. If you can get just one solid testimonial that shines a light on your product, then you're going to see your conversion rate instantly increase by 35%. It's that simple. I cannot necessarily say that more testimonials included on the page drive that number higher, but what I can say is that one quality testimonial will increase your conversion rate by up to 35%. And we consistently see that across the board. Testimonials are really, they're so simple, but they go so much further beneath the surface because they're already those testimonials are coming from people who are likely just like your target customer, who've already been down the same path. And when someone can see and read about what someone else who's just like them, like, have had a result, or whatever situation they were in was able to be improved by that product, they're so much more likely to take action off of that page. And the third and most important, I'm going to call it an element of a sales page. Sales pages need to be personal. Sales pages need to not feel, you need to work hard to make sure that your sales page doesn't feel like it's disconnected or it's not humanized in a way that someone can relate to. Folks, like I said earlier, love stories. And one of the methods that we have seen be a huge lever to pull when it comes to driving conversions is, let's say you have a personal story to tell about why you started your membership. I would encourage you to include that story on your sales page. Forget about how long it is. Obviously you don't want to write a book here, but I would encourage you not to try to make it too short, and be honest, be authentic, and be to the point. And if you're able to do this, you're able to immediately infuse some degree of, you're humanizing your brand. Folks put a picture with a story. Folks see a face with a story, and you immediately make your target market feel like you're in their corner. You've also shown them that you've likely traveled the same path that they've traveled. So you've established immediate trust when you do this. This isn't a hard requirement, but I will say it's one of the secret mechanisms and one of the strategies that we see is when someone has something to say from a personal perspective and has a story to tell about how that product fits into that story, it amplifies your results so well. And you're going to see so many more conversions when you do this. So the goal here is to have someone who's so ready to purchase, they've read enough, they're like, just tell me where to sign up, I'm in. The last part of the sales page needs to be bold. It needs to be aligned with everything you've talked about above that fold. And it also needs to have urgency. So one of the things I want you to notice, if I just do a quick scroll of this website, Color choice. Clearly, we have our brand colors consistent across this page. It's easy to read. It's skimmable. It's very skimmable up until this point. This is the part where you want folks to really get drawn into this sales page. In fact, most people don't read word for word on every sales page, but they get to they'll land on a section that really sparks their curiosity. And what better way to serve someone's curiosity than a story? So we pull them in at the part just above the offer. So we've done that with this story. And then we have a hard contrast down here. This is the part that after they've read that personal story, if you can have a level of contrast that's very, very significant and clearly lays out the offer, this is going to serve you well. So I already know what the product is. I now know that if I sign up, I'm likely going to be part of the 15% of businesses that ultimately don't fail. So this sample landing page kind of has all those ingredients, and these are the core components that we see as being the most significant. When it comes to generating membership signups, regardless of your membership's price points, one of the things that members value most is the ability to interact with the founder of that membership. So if we look up in this personal story, this particular founder tells us that, if you sign up, he'll set up a personal call for him to talk one-on-one with you about what your business goals are. If you can find a way, it's not necessarily a lead magnet, but it is something that you're able to promise on the spot that if someone books with you or someone signs up for your membership, if they get to have that interaction immediately or shortly after signing up, it's just another lever you can pull to really amplify that conversion rate. And it makes it harder at this point for someone to say, no, I'm not interested, than to say like, yes, let's give this a try. So I think if you just look at the value proposition of everything that this landing page includes, it has the 40% off offer. Offer wise, it's very generous. However, it does project exclusivity to the potential customer at this point. A lot of folks will use countdown timers if this is a high priced product, and you really want to squeeze that conversion rate to be as high as you want it to be. I would encourage you to find a way to add urgency, and whether that's a time limited sale, whether that's a coupon that's good for 3 days only. Like, there's a lot of ways you can do this, but having urgency on the sales page is one of the most significant drivers that determines the outcome on that sales page. So we really have just 5 core sections of what happens here. So we've got the headline. We established early on what the offer is. We know immediately there's a 40% offer on the table. We know what we're getting. We know what the core benefits of the membership are. We know what the testimonial reads from someone who's probably been down the same exact journey that we're currently on. And we get a personal story from the person that created this membership, who clearly lays out how this product fits within that story and how this product improves your situation. And lastly, it's almost like if you go back up here and look at this personal story section, it asks for the sell. This is the thing I said that's so important when it comes to sales pages, is you have to literally ask your potential customer for the sell. Ask them to take action. Ask them to join whatever it is you're offering. Ask them to participate in your service. Be explicit, and don't be afraid to ask for that sell, and make it as easy as possible. So this website is very short. It's not long. It's not boring. It's quick. It's to the point, and it captures all of those elements that we talked about in our presentation over here earlier. So I wanted to show that as an example, because when we think about landing pages and emails and sales pages, it kind of can become all jumbled up. But if you think about them in terms of 3 specific steps, landing page equals lead generation. Step 2 is where you nurture via email. And step 3 is that sales page that you created just for the folks who are on your list. One of the things I'm going to highlight real quick about the sales page, some of the core features. We quickly communicated the problem we were solving. We offered up the solution. We included emotion. We had a story that explained the story behind the membership, why it was created, and the results that could be expected. And most importantly, that sales page provides a path to where you want that potential customer to be. In this case, we wanted that person to be in our membership. If we think about the core components, the offer that we gave them was exclusive. We captured the story. We positioned our product within that story. We had the testimonial, and we created urgency through a time limited offer. And we were able to highlight the consequence of not taking action. So we'll send this out to you after the webinar. But if you want to go back and read that story on that sales page, it highlights the consequence of not taking action and not making that purchase on that page. So, and most importantly, it asked for the sale. So, again, it's so important. Always ask for the sale on your sales page. Don't be afraid to ask for the sale. Don't feel like you have to, be go in a roundabout way. Always be direct when asking for the sale. And I can promise you that if you've done all of these other things that are above this last bullet here, asking for the sale is not a daunting task. So folks are going to be happy to purchase from you. Folks are going to want to purchase from you because you have gone so far with them, and you've established trust, you've established intent, and you have shown time and again how invested you are in their experience. So asking for the sale is not going to lose you sales, I promise. So always ask for that sale. Past that, so what is the ultimately the end result that we can expect when we look at the situation where you have all these things that are happening on your homepage versus when we target traffic and send it to our landing page and to our sales page? So our bounce rate, the average bounce rate on a homepage is 82%, like we mentioned earlier in the presentation, but landing pages have a 23% bounce rate. The conversion rate goes from 0.19% to 12%. That's an astronomical increase. And in fact, the numbers you see in green here are actually conservative and on the low end. I just included the low end of the range just to really drive home the point that the gains to be had when you implement a focused approach to how you're speaking to your traffic, where you're directing that traffic, the results are measurable and they are significant, and they can be the sole difference between a membership business that is sustained and a membership business that maybe gets a lot of additional signups and ultimately dies out over time. And when you think about, landing pages versus home pages, the cool thing about landing pages and the cool thing about sales pages is that you can easily replicate them to speak to whatever audience that you need them to speak to. So I can have a landing page for my Instagram account, and I can have a separate landing page for my Facebook account. I could even have a separate landing page set up for traffic that gets referred to my site through a partnership or from a blog post, because I know that the characteristics of all of those audiences are all different, and those characteristics need to be addressed in really different ways. And landing pages are a super efficient way to do that. And there's no way you could ever do all of these things on a single static homepage. There's no way you could complete each of these tasks by sending traffic to your public facing website. So when we look at where the opportunity is and what the true measurable impact of landing pages is at the end of the day, it's clear. I like my chances on these numbers way better than I like my chances on the homepage numbers. So my hope is that when you look at this, you take a step back and you say, okay, I've got half of the equation already on the paper. I just need to implement the other half of this. And I think what you're going to find is that the results that you start to see are going to be significant, and they're going to be fast, because this is, like I said, this is the biggest gap in, just overall business that we see with membership-based products and membership websites and the customers we work with. Lastly, I want to mention here a small piece about consistency. If you think about all of the things we've just talked about, there's a lot of steps involved. There's the customer who may visit your public facing website and receive an impression of your brand. There's a customer who landed on your landing page, offered you their email. That's a separate touch point with your brand. You have so many opportunities to carry that brand consistency through with a potential customer, and you need to be sure that between the landing page, between your website, between your email, and between your sales page, every touch point that someone has with that brand, it needs to be so consistent that you're instantly recognizable and folks will start to trust you on the spot. Because one of the things that we do see, not terribly frequently, but we do see it often, is where you have a website that uses a certain color scheme, and then you set up a landing page that belongs with the same brand, but the color scheme may be different. And folks don't really give a lot of thought to how something as simple as one or two colors, what is the implication of having something that's mismatched? And it can actually be quite confusing for consumers. You could imagine that if I have a brand where, red and yellow are my core colors, but I land on the brand's landing page where I have red and blue, it could be confusing for a customer. It may sow doubt into that customer's mind. So keep consistency across the board. And what I mean by that is that, being trustworthy and authentic and recognizable are all of the things that are going to fall out of this when you implement that across your whole strategy, on the sales page, on the landing page, on the email, all of those parts. Those are going to be amplifiers of the results that you see. And just to kind of wrap this all together, this is what it looks like. So if I was to take core components of all of the pages that we looked at, you see instantly that they all feel the same. They all look the same. They clearly all go with the same brand. The copy is similar. So consistency needs to carry through every single touch point. And, just to kind of wrap this up, I think the takeaway here is that whatever strategy you end up going with, there's an infinite amount of ways to run a business. And the goal here today was to show you what the easiest set of practices to implement from a sales perspective would be. But I would encourage you just to go back and take a look at your website and look and put yourself in the customer's position and see, where are the inconsistencies in my tone of voice? Where are the inconsistencies in the colors that I use? Where are the inconsistencies in the size of my logo and where it appears? All of these things, they feel insignificant, but this is one of those examples where the sum of all of those is greater than the individual value of each of those individual parts. So I do want to drive home the point that consistency always matter. It will continue to matter. It feels insignificant sometimes, but it is one of those qualitative things that push folks even closer to that point of conversion, which again is what we're all after here. And just to wrap things up, we did talk about how your general website is there to drive awareness of your brand, but because of all the reasons we discussed, there's no way that it could be appropriately optimized for sales, especially when you have multiple audiences that you're working with. Landing pages and sales pages are the solutions that we use to drive higher conversions. Those are like your secret weapons when it comes to lead generation, sales, and not only sales, but that brand identity that you're trying to achieve. The more touch points you can have with someone, the better. And if those are all closely aligned to each other, you're going to have far better results than you would if you just send all that traffic to your homepage. Customer journeys are important. They're a very important factor that goes into the sales process. I would encourage you, if you don't have some sort of flow in place for a potential customer, whether it's an onboarding flow, whether it's a lead generation flow, it can be simple. It could be as small as 3 steps, but without it, you will not be able to scale your results. So customer journeys are extremely important. And then lastly, landing pages are what allows us to tailor solutions that work for different audiences. You would be shocked at the amount of money that's left on the table in terms of revenue by not segmenting and not working with targeted audiences and sending each of those target audiences to its appropriate landing page. One of the examples that sticks out in my mind is I worked with a customer who had a core landing page that they used for everything. And the landing page worked quite well. I had an average conversion rate of about 10%. But what we noticed was that his Instagram traffic converted at like a 15% rate. His Facebook traffic converted at like a 14% rate, but the Google traffic converted at like a 4% rate. So where's the gap? And it turns out if you look at where that opportunity was, creating separate landing pages that include different copy, different conversations about where those particular customers were at their point in their journey. They were all different, and because they were all different, they had to be spoken to in different ways. And once you like you dive into that and learn what those needs are, you're going to have a massive shift in the amount of revenue that you see and the amount of membership signups that you're able to generate. That particular customer I mentioned to you, he went from having one landing page with an average of 10% to 3 separate landing pages with a conversion rate of around 15% per landing pages. So what he was able to find out was that in his target market, he could consistently convert 15% of all of his visitors. He just needed to speak to those different audiences in a very specific way. So landing pages are crucial to your overall long-term success. Past that, I think if you look out into if you just look at the economic landscape and what membership means to a lot of people, it seems like membership in general requires more conversation and more personal touch points than a standalone product. And, you could even consider having multiple landing pages along the way until someone gets to that sales page, because when someone is going to pay you on a recurring basis, they often need a little bit more. They need to establish more trust. They need a little bit more time to get comfortable with your offering. So landing pages will be the sole driver of how that shakes out, I think, for most people for the foreseeable future. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope that maybe this shifted some of your perspective around the sales process and how you're using your website, how you're sending traffic and where you're sending your traffic. If you got any questions, we're always happy to help.